Personal computers. During the 1980s and 1990s, personal computers became very widespread. The use of the computer has changed people's lifestyles in several ways. Before 1980, hardly anyone owned a computer. Only governments and large companies had computers. But throughout the 1980s and 1990s, computers became much cheaper, faster, and smaller, and they held much more memory. More and more people were able to afford to buy a computer. By the year 2000, computers had become very common. For many people, the personal computer is used mainly for performing calculations and for word processing. For example, people can calculate their finances on the computer. They can also use the computer to type their written documents, such as essays or letters. Many people enjoy playing games on their computers. Some people like to play chess or checkers on their computer. Other people prefer games that require fast reflexes and fine coordination. Computer games were very simple during the early days of the 1980s. Today's computer games show detailed images and sounds. Another very popular use of computers involves communication. Many people keep in touch with their friends and relatives by using electronic mail or email. Email allows people to send letters instantly to people far away. It is even possible to attach pictures to one's email messages. Many people also like to use their computer to gain information on the Internet. The Internet is a vast network of electronic pages where people can find information on many different topics. For example, people can read newspapers and magazines on the Internet. Personal computers have only existed for a short time, but for many people, those computers have quickly become a very useful part of everyday life. A small town. I grew up in a small town. There were only about 2,000 people who lived in the town where I grew up. When a town is very small, it is also called a village. My village was surrounded by many farms and many lakes. The house where my family lived was near the middle of the town. On the streets where we lived, most of the houses were similar in size, but many of them had different shapes and different colors. Each house was surrounded by a yard, where people grew their lawn and their garden. Often, I would walk from my house to the downtown part of the village. Downtown is the area where the stores and shops of a town are located. Because I lived in a small town, it was a short walk to the downtown area. Along the main street, there are several different kinds of stores. Some stores sold food, some stores sold clothing, and some stores sold hardware or building supplies. It was also a short walk to the schools in my town. When I went to elementary school, it would take about 10 minutes to walk to the school. Some of my friends lived on the same street where I lived. Sometimes we walked to school together. During the summer months, many people came from the big city to visit our village. The people liked to get away from the busy streets of the city. They enjoyed the quietness and the slow pace of village life. They also liked to spend their vacations near the lakes that were near the village. People from the city often said that people who live in villages seemed very friendly. When I grew up, I left my village and I went to work in a larger town. But sometimes I like to go back and visit the place where I grew up. Visiting the doctor. When people feel sick, they go to a doctor. But sometimes people visit the doctor even when they are not sick. Doctors can perform a medical checkup to find out if a person is healthy. By performing this physical examination, the doctor can identify any health problems that might be developing. During a checkup, the doctor examines your eyes, ears, and throat. The doctor uses a small flashlight to examine the eyes, ears, and throat. It is important to make sure that the eyes react normally to changes in light. It is also important to make sure that the ears and throat have a normal appearance. When the doctor examines your throat, he or she will ask you to open your mouth wide and say, "Ah." The doctor uses a stethoscope to examine the patient's heartbeat, The stethoscope hangs around the doctor's neck. By using a stethoscope, a doctor can hear the patient's heartbeat very clearly. While checking the patient's heart, the doctor also listens carefully to make sure that the patient's breathing is normal. The doctor also checks the patient's blood pressure. Blood pressure is measured by placing a cuff around the arm. Air is then pumped into the cuff, and this allows blood pressure to be measured. Having very high blood pressure or very low blood pressure is not good for one's health. It is better to be in between. Another part of the examination is a test of the reflexes. The doctor tests the patient's reflexes by gently hitting his or her knee with a small hammer. If a person has normal reflexes, the leg will extend suddenly. Sometimes a doctor may give injections using a needle as an extra part of the checkup. These injections, called vaccinations, prevent the patient from developing certain illnesses. Medical checkups can help to maintain health, but people should also maintain their health by leading a healthy lifestyle. Being a good citizen. Every society has laws that regulate the way people behave. A good citizen should obey laws. However, there is more to being a good citizen than merely obeying laws. There are many other things that people can do to make their society a pleasant one for every person. One way to be a good citizen is to be polite in everyday activities. For example, when passing through a door, a considerate person will hold the door open for a person who is close behind. Holding doors open is especially important when someone is carrying a heavy load. Being a good citizen is very important when traveling on the roads and streets. Pedestrians, bicyclists, and car drivers should all follow the rules of the road. Bicyclists should yield to pedestrians, and car drivers should yield to both bicyclists and pedestrians. Drivers should also allow other drivers to merge into their lanes. Also, drivers should avoid honking their horns except when this is necessary. A good citizen will also avoid doing things that interfere with others. For example, a considerate person does not smoke cigarettes in areas where this might irritate others. Also, a polite person avoids playing music so loudly that other people will be annoyed. And, of course, a good citizen avoids littering or making a mess. Other ways of being a good citizen involve greater effort. Some people serve their community by doing volunteer work of some kind. Other people help by donating money to a charity. Another way to serve the community is to donate blood. Blood donors are needed so that there will be enough blood available to help people who are sick or injured. Being a good citizen is very helpful for the community, and it also gives a feeling of satisfaction and pride.
Living in London. Welcome to this latest lecture on living in London. Today we're going to look at transport, and I'd like to start with the London Underground system, also called the Tube because of the shape of the tunnels. First, you need to learn your lines. There are 12 different lines, each with its own name. For example, the Piccadilly line, the Circle line. Each line is a different colour on the map of the Underground system. You can find the map in the ticket hall at each Underground station, and usually on the platforms as well. Sections of the map are also displayed in the carriages of the Underground trains. Before you begin, it helps to know which line you are starting on and on which line your destination can be found. If they are on different lines, look at the map to see where the two lines cross, and note the name of the station where they meet. That is where you have to change trains. If the two lines do not cross, keep looking until you find a third line that crosses both of the other two. Then you will need to change trains twice. You can buy a ticket from one of the automatic machines or from the ticket office. Either way, you need to know the name of the station you are going to. You also need to know whether you want a single ticket, which is valid just to get you to your destination, or a return, which gets you there and back again. Fares are based on a zone system. The more zones you travel through, the more expensive your fare is. there are 6 zones, with Zone 1 covering central London and Zone 6 covering the outskirts of the system, including, for example, Heathrow Airport. Most of the underground maps show which stations are in which zones. A single ticket for travel through all 6 zones currently costs £4. Depending on how far you are travelling and how many journeys you need to make, it may be cheaper to buy a one-day travel card, which gives you unlimited travel on all London Underground and bus services. The day you buy it. A one-day travel card covering all 6 zones currently costs £8. You can also buy an Oyster card. This is the best option if you are going to be in London for a long time. You get a discount on all tickets, usually about 10%. And you don't have to queue to buy tickets. Just buy credit for your card and then use it as directed when you enter and leave underground stations at the start and finish of your journeys. At underground stations you must pass through an automatic gate. Put your ticket into the slot to the right of the gate. When the gate opens, pass through. As you pass through, your ticket will pop up from another slot on the top. Pull your ticket out and take it with you. You need it at the end of your journey. This is the same procedure for travel cards. With Oyster cards, you hold your card over the card reader at special automatic gates. If you have baggage with you, you can go through a special larger gate where you can pass through more easily. Show your ticket to an attendant and ask him or her to let you through this gate. Most stations have long escalators leading to and from the trains. Try to stand to the right-hand side, leaving space for people to walk past you on the left. When changing trains, get off at the station where the line you are on crosses the line you need. Follow the signs for the line you need and the direction you want to go in. When you leave the system, you must pass through an automatic gate again to leave the station. Put your ticket in the slot as before. If you bought a return ticket or a travel card, your ticket will pop up for you to collect again, so that you can use it later. If you bought a single ticket, or if you are on the return trip of your return ticket, your ticket will stay in the machine. To find out more about the London Underground, check the official website, www.thetube.com. This site also has the map and information in numerous foreign languages. Now, let's move on to
volunteer work in Africa.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jane Winter, and I'm here to tell you a little about the possibility of volunteer work in Africa. If you're looking for volunteer work in Africa, there are plenty of opportunities available. Let's look at the different types of volunteer opportunities available in Africa, what to expect when volunteering in Africa, and stories from volunteers who have worked in Africa. Volunteering means something different to almost every organisation you come across. Some agencies will cover your flight and cost of living while you are working, and some are true volunteer projects and expect you to cover all costs for the privilege of the experience. If you're looking for a more meaningful way to spend a few months in Africa than simply travelling around, volunteering is a wonderful way to spend your time. Most jobs that last less than a year or so are going to be the ones you have to pay for. Jobs that require a commitment of more than a year will often offer a basic stipend to cover some of your costs. Whether you get paid and how much you get paid will also depend on your skills and how much they're in demand. Most paid volunteer opportunities in Africa are available to those who have a university education and/or a practical skill. Engineers, doctors, nurses, environmentalists, emergency relief personnel, and teachers are among the most asked for by volunteer agencies. If an organisation doesn't require you to have specific skills, then you will usually have to pay your own expenses as a volunteer. In general, most organisations working in Africa try and recruit as many local people as possible rather than foreigners, since the project should continue long after you have returned home. So don't take it personally if your intention to help people in Africa is rejected. It may just be that a local person is better suited to the job. What should you expect when you volunteer to work in Africa? Conditions are usually basic. Most volunteer opportunities take place in rural areas, where you may not have ready access to running water and electricity. Housing can be very basic, and you will likely be staying with local families. A word about cultural adaptability. As in most countries in the world, rural communities are usually more traditional than urban centres. As you will be working closely with the local population, you will have to dress and behave in accordance with what is acceptable locally. General pace of life and work is much slower than in the West. Don't expect any organisation to run efficiently and without glitches. Getting sick can be a problem. If you're spending more than just a few weeks in Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, your chances of getting malaria or bilharzia will also increase. Make sure you take all the medicine and precautions you need. The organisations you work with should brief you about health issues, and don't forget that local nurses and doctors will have plenty of experience with these common afflictions, probably more than your doctor at home. Initially, you may also have some problems getting used to different food and water. Anyone who has volunteered in Africa will probably tell you that the biggest impact their project had was not on the community but on themselves. Spending time immersed in another culture will change the way you look at life and is part of the appeal of volunteering. Before you decide to volunteer in Africa, you may be interested to learn what the typical experiences are of people already in the field. Later, we'll look at a selection of volunteer stories and experiences from Africa. There are many volunteers and travellers who keep online diaries of their experiences. These contain some excellent tips about working, travelling, and living in Africa. Before that, just a quick word about work permits in Africa. Many people who travel around Africa may wish to stay and work. But just as in Europe or the US, every African country will require you to get an official work permit. In most cases, these laws exist to stop foreigners getting jobs that local people may be qualified for. Unemployment is bad enough throughout Africa, so don't take a job that a local person could do. Now, let's look at a few people's experiences.